Ever get that feeling? Like you're walking down the street or looking out your window, and I don't know, it just hits you how much everything's changed, you know? The landscape's different, buildings pop up, streets get rerouted.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You start to notice, like, oh, there used to be a park there, or wait, that building wasn't so tall last year.
Right. It makes you think about all the stories like hidden just beneath the surface.
Hmm.
Stories of, I guess, progress, definitely, but also, well, sometimes not for everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Like, who benefited from all this change and maybe who got pushed aside, you know?
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, right?
Yeah.
We've got this incredible set of sources all about the work of this amazing Malaysian artist, Nirmala Aishan.
Oh, yeah. Nirmala, really, really important figure.
Her art, especially from the 1970s, it's like this snapshot, right,
Hmm.
of Kuala Lumpur just exploding, growing so fast. And what's wild is how her observations from back then, they still feel relevant to the city today, even in 2025.
She was like the Malaysian conscience, tackling social issues, everything from local poverty to international crises. Like, wow.
And what's cool is how she evolved as an artist. Started with abstract expressionism, but then moved into photography and mixed media, really pushing the boundaries.
Really experimenting, yeah. Wanted to make art that like really engaged with the real world, the problems she saw.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we're going to really get into that journey, right? How her methods changed, her concerns about Kuala Lumpur, especially as seen in her statement series, this amazing set of works from like 1973 to 1979.
A powerful response to what she was seeing, yeah.
And this isn't just a history lesson, right?
Yeah.
We're also lucky enough to have this contemporary analysis making new statements by Blank Malaysia, which looks at Nirmala's work through the lens of 2025.
Really connecting the dots, past to present, seeing how those issues, how those transformations, they still play out today.
Okay, so Nirmala's artistic journey, it took a big turn, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned her landscape series. That was more, well, abstract. What made her shift to focusing on, I guess, the built environment, like the city itself?
Ah, well, she worked with this artist, Ismail Zain, for a while, right? And he really pushed her, to look beyond just like the pretty picture, to see the landscape as a product of all these forces changing it.
I see. So it wasn't just about painting a scene anymore. It was about understanding what shaped that scene.
Exactly.
And View from Federal Hill from 1972, that seems like a key moment, right, when this new perspective really clicked for her.
Yeah, you can see it in that piece. She's engaging with the actual stuff of the city,
Yeah.
the waste, the pollution in the rivers, even the air quality. It's not just a pretty view anymore. It's like a commentary.
So the beauty of it became, I guess, secondary to what it revealed about, like, where the city was headed.
Yeah, and that's when you see her moving away from painting, right? Like it wasn't enough for her anymore.
Wow. As an artist, that's a huge decision, right? To just abandon your main medium.
It was. But she needed something more direct, more like in your face to address these issues. That's when she gets into photography, mixed media.
And that brings us to the statement series, right? 1973, she's really found her voice now, responding to all this rapid urbanization.
Oh, yeah. This series, it's powerful stuff.
So statement one, 1973, this is where it gets really interesting. A notice board combined with photographs. Tell me about that. What was it like?
Okay, so imagine, right? This notice board on one side, she's got these 12 clippings, from newspapers, magazines, even some charts and diagrams. And then on the other side, bam, 20 black and white photographs, all from the Damansara area.
Okay, so the notice board, what kind of statements was she making with those clippings? Like, give me some examples.
Well, she had one, culprit and victim himself. Like, we're all responsible, right, for the environment. Then there was this quote, how just a little bit of forest makes enough oxygen for one person, emphasizing how important nature is. And then like stark headlines, the sad story of our river, even stuff from overseas, smog shrouds Los Angeles, Tokyo fight for breath.
Wow. So she's drawing these parallels, right, between Kuala Lumpur and other cities struggling with, like, pollution and environmental issues.
Yeah, like a warning,
Yeah.
it's happening here too.
And they were arranged chronologically, right? The clippings. Did that add to the message?
Totally. She's creating a timeline, from a
Yeah.
time when Malaysia was maybe more, well, naturally abundant to now where industry's taking over.
And potentially heading for trouble based on what's happening elsewhere.
Exactly.
Okay, and then the 20 photographs, how do those fit in with the notice board?
Those were the proof, the evidence. Like she went out to Damansara, documented all this pollution, deforestation, just piles of garbage.
So the photographs were like visual confirmation of what the clippings were warning about.
Yeah, and to really drive it home, she actually brought garbage into the gallery, like real trash. Can you imagine?
Wow, it's pretty bold. So putting it all together, what was she saying with statement one?
She was saying, hey, look, buying to Malaysia, this push for development, it's coming at a cost. Like we're losing our natural beauty and we're heading for a pretty bleak future if we don't wake up.
Right, so progress isn't always progress for everyone.
And everything's connected.
And then, in 1974, she does pollution piece, right? How did that connect to statement one?
It's like a zoom in.
Yeah.
Still about environmental change, but now focusing on specific places. Batu Caves, Xinjiang.
Hmm.
She's showing how these areas are being transformed, polluted.
And she's reflecting the concerns of environmental groups that were starting to pop up, right?
Yeah, there was this growing awareness. People were starting to say, hey, we need a Ministry of Environment. We got to take this seriously.
So she's not just an artist, but also like an activist in a way, reflecting and amplifying these concerns.
Exactly.
Then, statement two in 1975. This one seems to shift a bit, focusing more on the people living around Damansara Road.
Yeah, this one's about the human cost. Like statement one in pollution piece, they showed the environment, but statement two is about how all this change is affecting the people living there.
And there's that section within it, impression of life in squatter areas, that seems particularly powerful. What was that like?
So she's got these 18 photographs, right, in a grid, showing the conditions people are living in. Overcrowded housing, trash everywhere, lack of basic services,
Yeah.
and even what looks like illegal gambling going on.
Wow, it sounds like a really tough situation.
It was, but then she shifts the focus to the kids, showing them playing, just living their lives. And it's so powerful because, like, you see their resilience, their humanity in the middle of all this hardship.
So it's not just about poverty, it's about the people enduring it. And then there was the details section, right? With even more focus on the children.
Yes, 16 portraits, all kids. It's like she's saying, look at them. They're individuals, each with their own story. And, despite all this rapid development happening around them, their lives weren't really improving.
So powerful. And it seems like those children really stuck with her, leading to statement three in 1979.
Yeah, statement three, that's where she really gets into the long-term impact. She goes back to Kampung Batu 4, the same kids she photographed before, 4 years later.
4 years. That's a significant chunk of time, especially for kids.
And what's heartbreaking is how little changed. Same kids, same environment, still impoverished. It's like progress just passed them by.
And she juxtaposed those images with photographs of other areas, right? Like to highlight the contrast.
Yeah, Bukit Damansara, Bangsar, you see all this new development, new houses, deforestation, all happening at the same time that Kampung Batu 4 is just stuck. It's like a visual representation of inequality.
Wow, that must have been really impactful.
And she didn't stop there. Statement 3 also covers other areas. Kuala Lumpur, Klang. There's this one panel, third series of documentation, showing these really unsanitary conditions near a garbage dump on the way to Subang Jaya. Like, she's frustrated. Things aren't getting better for these marginalized communities.
So she's expanding her critique, showing that this isn't just a local issue, it's a systemic one. And then finally, statement four, also 1979, this one seems to be a very direct appeal, focusing on the economic struggles of families.
Yeah, this one gets really personal. 6 photographs, children living in these tiny, cramped homes. And she includes these descriptions in Malay and English about one family, 10 kids, barely scraping by on $200 a month.
10 kids. That's a lot of mouths to feed.
Most of their money's going to food, leaving nothing for education, healthcare. She even points out that none of the older kids have even reached MCE level.
Really illustrating that cycle of poverty, right?
Right.
How hard it is to break free when you're starting with so little.
Exactly. And then there's this missing panel, right, that she mentions. It was supposed to show the price of a concert ticket for some fancy international performance next to the family's monthly expenses.
$200, right?
Yeah, highlighting that huge gap,
Okay.
between the haves and the have-nots.
So powerful. Okay, so Nirmala's statement series, it's this incredibly detailed, critical look at Kuala Lumpur in the 70s. Now, let's bring in blank Malaysia, right? Their analysis, it takes Nirmala's work and, well, brings it into the 21st century.
Yeah, they're doing something called practice-based research, which is really interesting. It's not just sitting back and analyzing. They're actually going out, revisiting Nirmala's sites, creating their own art. inspired by hers.
So they're continuing her work in a way, but through a contemporary lens.
Exactly. And they start by like really digging into the history,
Hmm.
of Kuala Lumpur Damansara Road. Because to understand the present, you got to understand the past.
Okay, so remind me, like, what's the historical backdrop here? Why is it so important?
Well, Kuala Lumpur, it started as this tiny little settlement, right? Then tin mining boomed, and the British got interested, obviously, because, well, money. It became the state capital in 1880, and that's when things really start to change.
And Damansara Road, it's got a history that goes way back, right?
Yeah.
Before the highways and all that.
Oh, yeah. It was built in the 1870s to connect Kuala Lumpur with Klang before the railway came. It was crucial for the city's expansion, for transporting goods and all that.
So it's like a literal pathway through history.
And then there's Federal Hill, Bukit Persekutuan.
Yeah.
Right. First, it was like a fancy neighborhood for colonial officers, then government housing after the war.
It's amazing how much history is packed into one area.
And then, of course, you have the areas around Damansara Road, like Bangsar. They started as like rubber plantations, then got sold off to developers in the 60s and 70s, became these suburbs.
So the area Nirmala was documenting, it was already shaped by all these forces, economic, social, political, even before the rapid urbanization she was seeing in the 70s.
Exactly. And that's where Blank Malaysia comes in, right? They kind of challenge, in a respectful way, some of Nurula's assumptions, especially about the past.
Yeah, in statement one, she contrasts this idyllic past with a more degraded present.
Yeah.
But Blank Malaysia suggests it's more complicated than that.
Right. They're like, hold on, even that idyllic past, it was already part of a colonial system, land grabs, resource extraction, indigenous people being pushed off their lands.
So not so idyllic for everyone.
And they point out, like, even photography itself, the tool Nirmala was using, it was also used by the colonial powers, right, to
Yeah.
document and, like, legitimize their actions.
That's a good point. So the idea of this pristine past, maybe it's a bit romanticized.
Yeah. They bring up these concepts, colonial enclosures, the Torrens system, all these ways land was basically taken and made into private property, often ignoring the rights of indigenous communities. And they reference William Cronon, who argued that the idea of wilderness, this untouched nature, can be a harmful concept because it erases the history of people who live there and their relationship with the land.
It's like we impose this idea of nature on a place that's already been shaped by human activity.
Exactly. And then there's Nancy Fraser, right? With her ideas about capitalism separating nature from the economy. Like, nature just becomes a resource to be exploited, not something valuable in itself.
And those systems,
Yeah.
they were already in place well before the 70s.
Exactly. So while they agree with Normala about the damage, they're also saying, hey, let's not oversimplify the past.
Okay, so Blank Malaysia provides this deeper historical context.
Yeah.
But they also highlight the power of what Nirmala did, right?
Oh, absolutely. They say she took these colonial tools, like photography, and turned them around, used them to expose the problems of development, the injustice.
So in a way, she's reclaiming those tools for a different purpose.
Exactly.
Now, Blank Malaysia didn't just do historical research. They also went out into the field, right? In 2025, they revisited Jalan Damansara, the places Nirmala photographed. What did they find?
Okay, so they did two surveys, right? One by car during rush hour, just to see how the traffic flows now, and then one on foot to really experience the area.
What stood out to them?
Well, first thing, the original Danansara Road, it's not really one road anymore. It's kind of fragmented. Parts of it have been absorbed into these huge highways, like the Sultan Iskandar Highway.
So the landscape's been literally reshaped.
Yeah, and it's packed, bumper to bumper traffic. But some parts are still there, especially the section going through Bukit Persekutuan. It's quieter there, more like a local road.
And they noticed the old street names, right? Like remnants of the past.
Yeah, Jalan Pulau Pinang, all those little side streets. And there were people out hiking, enjoying the green space, and workers maintaining the landscaping.
So some things remain, even amidst all the change. But then, as they get closer to the Pusat Bandar Damansara MRT station, that's where things really shift, right?
Yeah, that's where Kampung Batu 4 used to be. But now it's unrecognizable. Condos, high-rises, construction everywhere for the new Pavilion Damansara Heights.
So the community Nirmala documented, it's basically gone.
Erased. And instead, you have like mostly migrant workers, working in construction, security, all the jobs that keep a place like that running.
And what about Bukit Persekutuan itself? All that green space, did it survive?
It's still there, surprisingly green. But there's this constant pressure, developers want to build there. It's prime real estate, even though it's supposed to be protected.
So the same forces Nirmala was worried about, they're still at play.
Yeah, they mentioned this former police training depot that got sold off for luxury apartments. And there's this new project, Setia Federal Hill, more development encroaching on the green space.
So even though it's officially a green area, it's still vulnerable.
And they saw garbage, Like even in these supposedly protected areas, if there's still neglect.
What about the impact on the Orang Asal communities? They were already facing pressure in Nirmala's time, and with all this development.
It's tough. Their traditional way of life, it depended on the forests, the rivers, and all that's being disrupted. The government's been relocating them to settlements like Desa Temuan, which, I mean, it's better housing, but it also disrupts their culture, their connection to the land.
So it's a trade-off, right? Modernization, but at a cost.
And they noticed the school for Orang Asli children still there, which is interesting. It's like a symbol of their resilience,
Yeah.
Still trying to maintain their identity in the midst of all this change.
So the on-site research really highlights the complexities of development, right?
Yeah.
How it affects people, the environment, all these interconnected things.
Yeah.
Now, Blank Malaysia also did this longer-term study using peddling Jaya as an example. Why peddling Jaya? What's significant about it?
It's like a classic case study, of a planned city. It was built from scratch after the war to resettle squatters from KL. And it's grown so much, it's a city itself now.
So it's a success story, in a way.
On the surface, yeah. But Blank Malaysia dug deeper, and they found these echoes of colonial systems, that still affect things today.
Okay, like what?
Well, Petaling Jaya, it used to be jungle, then tin mines, then plantations, rubber, coffee, all that. And the colonial government, they basically carved it up, sold it off, and that's how it became the city.
So the very foundation of this city is rooted in these colonial practices of commodifying land, extracting resources.
And it has consequences, even today. Like the deforestation, they say only 6% of Petaling Jaya is still forest. And all those tin mines, they left behind toxic waste, right? Which is still a problem, health risks, pollution.
So the past is still very much present.
And then there's the development, They keep building new stuff, converting land, and it's pushing up the cost of living, making it harder for the poor to survive.
And that connects back to Normala's work, right? The issue of inequality, the
Yeah.
gap between rich and poor.
Yeah, she was worried about that back in the 70s, and it's still a problem. They cite studies showing that the poorest 40% of workers, their incomes are barely growing, while the rich get richer.
And we see the same patterns of migration, right? People
Yeah.
coming to the city for opportunities, ending up in squatter settlements, struggling to make ends meet.
And then there's the migrant workers, right? They're essential to the city, but they're often exploited, low wages, terrible living conditions, and it all goes back to those colonial systems, the commodification of labor.
So the more things change, the more they stay the same, in a way.
In a way, yeah. It's like the systems that Nirmala was critiquing, they've just evolved, Found new ways to extract value, often at the expense of the environment and the most vulnerable.
Well, this has been, really eye-opening. We started with Nirmala's powerful art, and then Blank Malaysia takes it even further, showing us these connections, past to present.
Really makes you think.
It does. And it makes you wonder, what about our own cities? What are the hidden stories behind the landscapes we see every day? Who's benefiting? Who's being left behind? And what can we do to change things to make progress that truly benefits everyone?
Big questions.
Big questions, yeah. And maybe, if you're feeling inspired, check out the work of artists in your own community. See how they're responding to these challenges. You might be surprised what you discover.
Always good to look closer, right?
Absolutely.